Vampires can be traced all the way back to ancient civilizations and have been reported in cultures all around the world. In the 1800s, the vampire evolved into the charismatic creature we know today. Since then, the vampires have become a staple in pop culture and have continued to transform and grow along with society. The concept of the lesbian vampire has lasted almost as long as the charismatic vampire, and even longer than the most well-known character in vampire literature, Dracula. Carmilla, a novel published in 1872, paved the way for the trope, which has persisted in popularity into the present. Monsters are created as reflections of the power dynamics, prejudices, and fears of a society. Frankenstein can be used to represent fears such as medical and scientific advancement. Godzilla was created 9 years after the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to represent the fears surrounding nuclear war. So, what can vampires tell us about society's fears? Historically, vampires have been used to represent the fear of disease. But what about the lesbian vampire? Carmilla was written in 1872 by the author Sheridan Le Fanu. The story follows the main character Laura and her interactions with a strange visitor named Carmilla. As the two become closer, Carmilla begins to make romantic advances towards Laura. The story ends with the revelation that Carmilla is secretly Countess Mircalla Karnstein, now a centuries-old vampire. The character Carmilla would introduce 2 new fears to vampire literature: the fear of female independence and homosexuality. During the time Sheridan Le Fanu was writing Carmilla, the literacy rate for men and women had recently become equal, which allowed women a new form of empowerment. The book can be seen as a response to this growing empowerment, as Carmilla is portrayed as extremely powerful, and her love for Laura shows how a powerful woman can corrupt a more innocent one. The book promotes the idea that being a lesbian can only lead to tragedy. In the 1930s, the world would once again be introduced to the lesbian vampire trope, this time on the silver screen with the movie Dracula's Daughter. The film followed villainous Maria Zaleska, the daughter of Dracula, who primarily preys on young women similarly to her father. Dracula's Daughter is full of queer subtext, and the original concept of the film planned to have much more, if not for the Production Code Administration, otherwise known as the PCA. During this time, the PCA ruled Hollywood with an iron fist, and their Hays Code made it prohibited to portray homosexuality on film. This resulted in a more subtextual lesbian portrayal, and characters like Maria led to the queer-coded villain which is often seen in film. Dracula's Daughter is not accepting of lesbianism and seeks to vilify it, using it to point out how Maria falls outside of the natural order. During the film, Maria visits a psychiatrist in order to cure her vampirism. This is most definitely an allegory for conversion therapy, and during this time period, this type of therapy became much more prominent in American culture. Homosexuality was seen as something that needed to be cured in society, something that was unnatural and frowned upon. Although we have a long way to go, modern society has softened their views on lesbians, and in America, gay marriage became legalized in 2015. The trope of the lesbian vampire has been reclaimed and used to depict positive relationships between complex characters. One example of the lesbian vampire trope being used for good can be found through the children's cartoon Adventure Time with the characters Marceline the Vampire Queen and Princess Bubblegum. These 2 characters are complex, and their gayness is not the entirety of their personalities, but instead just a trait of their identity. Their relationship is never seen as different, but treated like any other relationship in the show. Relationships like Marceline and Bubblegum show how far we have come from Carmilla and what a lesbian relationship should look like when being depicted in film. In conclusion, vampires and lesbians will always go hand in hand. Although it started with Carmilla, a book meant to vilify love between women and female empowerment, in modern times, this trope has been used to portray positive relationships between complex female characters.